We've grabbed the 4 biggest clubs from the 4 biggest leagues in the world, locked them in a tournament together, and we're going to make them draft their teams. The draft pool will include every player from each of these top 4 leagues. So just because they don't play for one of these teams in real life doesn't mean they're not draft eligible. As long as you're in the same league, you're good. And I know what you're about to say. I let Football Manager make this decision. This is the top 4 from every one of those leagues based off of reputation given in the game. I didn't decide this. Leave me alone. It wasn't me. The draft order has been randomly generated and Juventus has the number 1 pick. But that's not necessarily a good thing because this is a snake draft. That means that if you have the number 1 pick now, you don't pick again until pick 32. And if you end up with the last pick of the first round, you get the first pick of the second round, which that happens to be Dortmund. Cue the drum roll. The first pick in the fantasy draft is Erling Haaland, because obviously Juventus is going to go with Erling Haaland here. That's just the most obvious pick of all time. Arsenal will be drafting second, and they've taken a Thierry Henry regen, perhaps, Kylian Mbappe. Barcelona has been given the 3rd pick, and upon further pondering and consideration, Barcelona has selected Harry Kane. Sevilla has the 4th pick, and they've gone for another striker, the man with the W's, Robert Lewandowski. Now, this first pick is incredibly important. This is going to be the best player on your team for the entire tournament. And enter goes with Mo Salah. RB Leipzig drafts 6th, and they select Lautaro Martinez. That may be the first big surprise, but if you've ever seen his attribute page in Football Manager, the dude's really good. But with guys like Bellingham, Vinny, Rodri, and KDB still on the board, that's a bold take. And so is the pick at number 7, which was AC Milan. And they've opened with Victor Osimhen. I see what they're doing here. They're going for the pace meta on Football Manager. Very smart of them. Bayer Leverkusen is the last team in the top half of the draft, and they've gone way off the beaten path here with Son Heung-min. It isn't until Manchester United drafting in 9th that Vinicius gets picked. Atletico Madrid is drafting 10th, and they select Antoine Griezmann. I guess it's just too good of a working relationship there. They're going to stick with the hometown guys. But it is after this 10th pick that the AI in Football Manager goes truly insane. Because with a lot of the best players in the world still on the board, Liverpool, with the 11th pick in the draft, selects Gabi Jesus. If you think that's crazy, Napoli, with the 12th pick in the draft, is picking off of potential and goes with Ansu Fati. Yes, that Ansu Fati. Now, some of the biggest clubs were at the back end of this first round, and they kind of returned us to normalcy a little bit. Bayern Munich picked Christopher Nkunku with the 13th pick. Manchester City and Pep Guardiola went with Alexander Isak in the 14th pick. Real Madrid, picking all the way down at 15, settled on Dusan Vlahovic. Remember who's still available here, but who was going to be the final first rounder to join such players as Kylian Mbappe, Erling Haaland, and Ansu Fati for some reason? Well, that would be Marcus Thuram, picked by Borussia Dortmund, who would then have a 2nd pick to start the 2nd round, which they would spend on Kevin De Bruyne. Freaking finally, man! The midfielders were clearly in play when we got to this 2nd round, because Real Madrid got Jude Bellingham. Man City got Eduardo Camavinga, and then Bayern Munich drafted Bernardo Silva. Napoli made up for the fact they drafted Ansu Fati in the 1st round by somehow getting Rodri in the 2nd. Some worlds collided, with Martin Odegaard going to Liverpool in the 2nd round, and Darwin Nunez going to Manchester United in the 2nd round. Luka Modric became a 2nd round pick when AC Milan picked him up 26th overall. Phil Foden, Pedri, Gavi, Fede Valverde, even Bruno Fernandes. They were all 2nd round picks, with the game clearly prioritizing midfield. The 3rd round was all about goalkeepers. Every single one of the teams drafted a goalkeeper, starting with Thibaut Courtois to Juventus. Sorry, every team except 2, because Manchester United ignored the run on goalkeepers and picked Ilkay Gundogan. And Napoli managed to swoop in and pick up another brilliant player in Frankie de Jong. The 4th round was the round of the defenders, with Borussia Dortmund picking up Virgil van Dijk with the 1st pick of the round. Real Madrid followed with Ruben Dias, and the run began. Ronald Araujo, William Saliba, Eder Militao, Antonio Rudiger, John Stones to Leverkusen. But soon, for our brave drafting teams, the minutes would turn into hours, and each one of these 16 clubs would build themselves a 25-man roster that would go up against everybody else's to compete against each other in the inaugural Draft Champions League. And once the draft was complete, it was time to unveil the groups. Now, they were organized in a particular way. Each league got its own group. In the English group, there was Manchester United, which would line up for its opening match with Darwin Nunez up top, then Vinny Jr., Sanset, and Nico Gonzalez in front of Cristante and Ilkay Gundogan, Estupinian, Ake Tapsoba, and Di Lorenzo on the back line, with their goalkeeper Ivan Providel. Arsenal would line up at a 4-3-3, a bit of a weird one with Jeremy Doku as the center forward, and an absolutely wild 1-2 punch of Kylian Mbappe and Thomas Muller on the wings. The Fernandez duo on the front of their midfield in front of Douglas Luiz at holding midfield. Then Teo Hernandez, Lewis Dunk, Dayo Upamecano, and Reece James on Arsenal, with one of the most valuable goalkeepers in the draft, the second goalkeeper taken, Ederson on the back. Liverpool would line up at a 4-4-2 because England. Their front two would feature their number 1 overall draft pick, Gabby Jesus, alongside Federico Chiesa. Then an incredibly interesting midfield four of Jack Grealish, Mikel Merino, Martin Odegaard, and Jeremy Frimpong. On defense, Ben Chilwell, Eder Militao, Raul Albiol, and Benjamin Pavard. Vicario is in goal. Then there's the incredibly intimidating 4-2-3-1 from Manchester City, led by Alexander Isak, their number 1 overall pick, but followed up by Kvaratskhelia, Paulo Dybala, and Iñaki Williams. The double pivot is Goretzka and Camavinga, which is then a back four of Grimaldo, Gabriel, Joachim Anderson, and Ronald Araujo. Unai Simon gets the nod as the goalkeeper. The first matchup, Arsenal against Liverpool. And Liverpool would get on it early with a lovely cross drawing out the goalkeeper and Ederson, finished off by Jack Grealish. And only a few minutes later, in the 10th minute of the game, it was the set piece. Benjamin Pavard smashing it through a crowd to give Liverpool a 2-0 lead. But then Arsenal, led by Kylian Mbappe's charge, would find Douglas Luiz in the box to get one back. And very late on in the match, it was a set piece with the goalkeeper up, scored by Reece James. A draw. But then it was time for the Manchester Derby to really get this group going. And it started with a spellbinding free kick from Paulo Dybala. But the problem is you'd get the full Paulo Dybala experience, he would get hurt 20 minutes later. And along with that injury, Manchester United would hand Manchester City not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 goals, rounded out by a spectacular strike from Nathan Ake. Meaning that Man City team that looked good looks like it's not, and that Manchester United team looks like the favorite. But believe me when I tell you, the England group is about to get incredibly weird. The Manchester United team that just won in dominant fashion would go behind against Liverpool's 4-4-2 thanks to Federico Chiesa. But living the full Darwin Nunez experience, they would get a response in the 92nd minute. He's able to get free of the mark of Eder Militao and slot a finish home with his left foot to complete a 1-1 draw. United on 4 points, Liverpool on 2. This meant Manchester City likely needed a win against an Arsenal team that drew Liverpool in their last match, which of course Man City promptly got. 2 first-half goals from Joachim Anderson and Goretzka powered Man City to a 3-0 win, which put the table at literally 4-3-2-1 going into the final day. The results basically meant that whoever won the matchup between Liverpool and Manchester City would advance to the knockouts, which would be remarkable for Man City considering they lost the first match 4-1. And then there was Liverpool, who'd drawn its first 2 matches and desperately needed a win. And that's where it found inspiration in Gabby Jesus, its number 1 overall pick, who teed up Jeremy Frimpong for a goal to put Liverpool in the lead. And that lead lasted until the second half, where Manchester City cooked up a set-piece goal off the head of Gabriel, and then in a bizarre play where Chilwell goes down with an injury while on the ball, Man City doesn't stop and just creates an absolute disaster class from Vicario that's tapped in by Isak. This result at 2-1 has Liverpool on life support, but they would get a second lease on that life off a throw-in play. Because they're already playing a 4-4-2, you might as well go full England. The long cross goes to Sorloth, and he heads it home to make it 2-2. 1 goal for either team at this point would surely send them through to the knockouts, but they would play to a draw. Liverpool drawing all 3 matches, pulling a New Zealand and getting eliminated without losing. So goodbye, team that drafted Gabby Jesus first overall. Obviously, what were they doing? The result also meant that Manchester United was very likely safe, unless Arsenal could win by 3 goals. And the first half played out scoreless. It was the start of the second half where things started to get interesting. Jeremy Doku got a service from Kylian Mbappe, and all of a sudden it's 1-0. Then, in the 76th minute, it's that combination of Mbappe looking for Jeremy Doku but finding Thomas Muller instead that creates a second goal. All of a sudden, one more goal from Arsenal would tie 3 teams on 4 points and a 0 goal difference, which is insane. But try as they might, Arsenal could not find a way through Provedal, which meant Arsenal was eliminated with 4 points and a -1 goal difference. Goodbye, Team Kylian Mbappe and Jeremy Doku and Thomas Muller. I kind of love this front 3. I'm sad they're gone. And the dual-wielding Fernandez eye. But if this table's any indication, the next 3 groups are also going to be incredibly close, because these drafted teams do not have a lot to separate them. Now it was time for Group B, with the 4 biggest Italian teams, starting with Napoli, who was going with a bit of a narrow formation. They would start their #1 overall pick at striker, Ansu Fati next to Iago Aspas in front of Alexi McAllister. Then it was Dani Olmo and Frankie de Jong with Rodri anchoring things down, which honestly is a tremendous midfield. A pretty darn good defense, starting with Miguel Gutierrez, Alessandro Bastoni, Ibrahimo Konate, and Denzel Dumfries. They were bringing out David De Gea in goal, so we had to see how that was going to work out. But they did have CONCACAF superstars Christian Pulisic and Leon Bailey on the bench, as well as Timo Werner. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, apparently a lot, because their first match was against Juventus, led by Erling Haaland, backed up by Gabby Martinelli, Charles de Ketelaere, and Domenico Berardi. A Premier League pair in the double pivot of Caicedo and Guimaraes, with Alphonso Davies, Sven Botman, Edson Alvarez at center back, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. This team is stacked. And in that opening match, they played like it, with a brilliant set piece from Trent Alexander-Arnold to Sven Botman, and then the classic long ball up to Erling Haaland, who makes a pretty complicated finish look simple. Napoli only managed to get .09 XG, but it did win the possession battle. The other 2 teams in the group are AC Milan and Inter. For AC Milan, they had the 4-4-2 with Artem Dovbyk and their overall #1 pick, Victor Osimhen. And then a timeless left side of their midfield with Raheem Sterling and Luka Modric. Aurelian Tchouameni and Angel Correa made up the right side, with Andy Robertson, Christian Romero, Danilo, and Danny Carvajal on the back 4. Fittingly, Mike Maignan would be their goalkeeper. Their opening matchup with Inter would face a back 5. And this is a wild team that I kind of like, with Romelu Lukaku offering big man energy as one of the strikers and Mo Salah playing off as the second striker. Then Julian Brandt and Phil Foden as the attacking midfielders, with Raum and Trippier as the wingbacks. Yves Bissouma is the anchor, and the back 3 is Christensen in the middle, with Kim Min-jae on the right and Luke Shaw on the left. Jan Oblak, the goalkeeper. These 2 teams' opening match was as even as they looked on paper, but Inter finally found the breakthrough on a corner. Mo Salah cranking that thing into the back of the net. But right as the final whistle was about to blow, AC Milan found their answer. A deep cross, some terrible goalkeeping, and Mateus Cunha finds the net. But this group would be in for one of the most surprising turnarounds you've ever seen. Remember when that one team, Napoli, drafted Ansu Fati in the first round and then lost its opening match in dominant fashion? Well, it bounced back with a controlled and measured win against this AC Milan team. Turns out that 4-4-2 just doesn't give you enough midfielders. And it really was 2 midfielders against 4. That's tough. But the real stars are the Napoli defense. Look at those match ratings. The match between Inter and Juventus was a 0-0. That left Inter on 2 points, Juventus on 4 points, Napoli on 3 points, and AC Milan on a lowly 1. But it was the final match day that the boys at Napoli looked like geniuses, because that insane first overall pick paid off, amazingly. In a match that Napoli most likely had to win, it was Ansu Fati that showed up with a banger of a goal. And then in the 90th minute, with Inter chasing the score, it was the same set-piece play, and Ansu Fati scores again. 2 goals from the same set-piece play, and Napoli cooked. After losing the opening match and drafting Ansu Fati first round, they win the group with 6 points, officially eliminating the team featuring Romelu Lukaku and Mo Salah up top, mostly because of terrible performances from their defense, and an apparently ineffective tactic. That result also meant that AC Milan needed to beat Juventus by 2 goals, which was basically impossible because Juventus scored 2 goals through Erling Haaland in the first half. But then AC Milan made some subs and started cooking. One of those being Mateo Kovacic, who unleashed a holy rocket to cut the lead to 2-1. Then, a couple minutes later, it's this beautiful team goal from AC Milan to cut it back to 2-2. What a finish by the first overall pick, Osimhen. And as the minutes tick by, in the 72nd, the sub Mateus Cunha appears. This time it's Osimhen with the assist, and AC Milan closes it down from a 4-goal gap to a 1-goal gap between them and the knockouts. Team Erling Haaland was hanging by a thread, but hang it would. AC Milan could not find a 4th goal. And this bizarre team wielding a 4-4-2 with Raheem Sterling and Modric and Artem Dovbyk was eliminated. So Napoli, Team Ansu Fati, and Juventus, Team Erling Haaland, the best and the worst pick of the first round, go through. In Group C, it was the Germans' turn to put their drafted teams to the test. And the first match would be Borussia Dortmund against Bayer Leverkusen. For Dortmund, it was Marcus Thuram in front of De Bruyne, Rashford, and Saka, a Premier League attacking trio that looks dangerous. Javi Guerra and Mason Mount make up an incredibly high work rate duo in the midfield, with Virgil van Dijk and Manuel Akanji at the center back spots. Alex Moreno and Matteo Darmian would definitely have a little bit to prove with the fullback positions, and Alex Murray was the goalkeeper. Now, I gotta be honest, that team is looking maybe just a little bit better than Leverkusen. They're rocking a 4-2-3-1 with Son Heung-min up top, Kingsley Coman, Pedri, and Jared Bowen. It's just an insane combination of players right there. The midfield's an underappreciated duo of Ezequiel Palacios and Ismail Benacer, with one of the favored left backs in every draft ever, Jose Gaia, with Pedro Porro on the right. Mark Gahey and John Stones, an English national team duo in the middle, with Gregor Kobel as the goalkeeper. But yeah, it didn't matter. Dortmund looked very, very good. The opening goal would go to the forgotten man, Mason Mount, charging in from the edge of the area. Then it was Marcus Thuram getting over the top and living up to his #1 billing. Bayer Leverkusen's wild combination of players would come up with a response, Jared Bowen to Son Heung-min for a Premier League connection. But a nasty set-piece play to Big Verge would close things off for a Dortmund win. On quality alone, looking like one of the favorites in the competition. But they'd have to survive the other two teams in the group, Bayern Munich and RB Leipzig. Bayern Munich could rock an old school 4-4-2, which we've seen a couple of times in this competition already. The strikers would be Nkunku, their #1 overall pick, next to Rasmus Højlund. They also had Evan Nielsen to play up there. A midfield of Thomas Lemar, Jamal Musiala, Bernardo Silva, and Rafinha offers a lot of attacking quality, with a good all-around defense in Ferland Mendy, Lisandro Martinez, William Saliba, and Joe Gomez. Jan Sommer's there, just in case of a penalty shootout, I guess. Lining up opposite them in the opening match is this RB Leipzig team, with Lautaro Martinez up top, then Matthias Zaccagni and Diogo Jota as the wings, which feels a little outgunned relative to the other wing creators we've seen. They've gone for potential at the wingbacks with Milos Kerkez and Tariq Lamptey, but the midfield's got a superstar in Yeshua Kimmich. He's paired up with Manuel Ugarte. And then a lights-out defense of David Alaba, Mats Hummels, and Matthijs de Ligt. And it didn't look good, with Ferland Mendy cooking the whole team for Rafinha to get a kind of tap-in goal. Then in the 34th minute, Koke to Rafinha again. Pretty similar looking play overall, and Bayern would put together a fairly dominant win. This gave us our first group with two teams that actually went and won, especially by multiple goals in the opening match. And the two teams that lost that opening match would not help themselves because they go and draw in the second match. It was a duel between the two first-round picks, with Lautaro Martinez scoring a penalty in the 11th minute, but then Bayer Leverkusen's Son Heung-min scoring in the 60th minute to even. Unfortunately, the fact that that was an absolute banger from Son does not add more than one goal. The other match is where the action was. The two winners of the opening match and two of the favorites now for the competition, Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich. Marcus Rashford converted a penalty early on to put Borussia Dortmund up by a goal, but then it was Rafinha, once again, with a fantastic little move to equalize for Bayern Munich. The second half would become particularly dramatic, with Borussia Dortmund scoring to take the lead 2-1 thanks to their first-round pick, Marcus Thuram. So you can get quality all the way down at 16. Dude's going off. But Bayern Munich would chase the game, and they would chase it brilliantly. Their first overall pick, Christopher Nkunku, would lose out, but Jamal Musiala, a player for them in real life and in the draft, would get it back to Nkunku to tie the game. And no less than 45 seconds later, this happens. Jamal Musiala gets an assist and a goal within a minute to flip from behind 2-1 to up 3-2, giving Bayern Munich 6 points in a straight path through to the knockouts. It's going to be hard to contain the quality of Bayern Munich. But this draft stuff is crazy unpredictable. But despite Bayern's greatness, Bayer Leverkusen would find a way to pull off the upset. Despite Bayern Munich getting over 3 XG, Bayer Leverkusen would put 2 first-half goals in and hold on for a 2-1 win. This meant that if Leipzig beat Dortmund by a goal, Bayer Leverkusen would somehow be alive and get through. But that didn't happen because of the Star Boy. A cleared corner goes to Bukayo Saka, and he rips a worldy bar down to give Borussia Dortmund the win and actually put them top of the group. This eliminated the team that drafted Lautaro Martinez in the first round, RB Leipzig. They had 5 amazing center backs, but not even they played well. The final group would see the Spanish teams finally kick off play. In the opening match, Barcelona and Atletico Madrid. Just to jog your memory, Barca's rocking an Iñaki Williams, Harry Kane front two, with a wild but maybe a little weak midfield combination of Serge Gnabry, Nicolo Barella, James Ward-Prowse, and Matteo Politano. The defense is Destiny Udogie, Robin Lenormand, Jules Koundé playing for his home team, and Kyle Walker, with Alisson in goal. They would line up across this Atletico Madrid team. Julian Alvarez, John McGinn, Antoine Griezmann, and James Maddison make up perhaps the weirdest of all front fours. They'd pair up a couple of Arsenal players in Declan Rice and Thomas Partey in the defensive midfield, then Zinchenko, Rudiger, Bremer, and Tomiyasu as the back four, with Emi Martinez as the goalkeeper. And Emi Martinez is the most Atletico Madrid goalkeeper of all time, so I approve this draft choice. This opening matchup would end up as a draw, but there were 2 disallowed goals for Atletico Madrid. But that left the group open for the taking for Real Madrid and Sevilla. Remember, these teams are drafted, which means Real Madrid doesn't have any better chance to win than anyone else, unless they also have an excellent drafting strategy. But the team would line up in a 4-3-3, with Dusan Vlahovic in the center and Leroy Sané and Michael Olise on the outside. Then there's Jude Bellingham and Conor Gallagher, a couple of La Liga players in the middle, with Casemiro returning to Real Madrid as the anchor. A who's who defense of Kieran Tierney, Pau Torres, Ruben Diaz, and Nusser Majraoui, all in front of Georgi Mamardashvili, the big Georgian keeper. Their opponents at Sevilla would be going for a more direct approach, with a terrifying front line of Robert Lewandowski and Dominic Calvert-Lewin in a 4-4-2. Then they had Rodrigo, Granit Xhaka, Fede Valverde, and Brais Mendes. The defense might be a little open though. They've got Federico Di Marco at left back, Fikayo Tomori and Giorgio Scalvini at center back, and then Lucharil Geertruida as their right back. But there to mop up any potential mistakes is the man with 4 names, Marc-Andre ter Stegen. But this bench is good. Mohamed Kudus, Patrick Schick, Florian Wirtz, Nico Schlotterbeck, Rico Lewis. Great options for Sevilla to call on later in games. But those did not help, because Real Madrid powered in 3 goals, starting with Jude Bellingham in the 8th minute to win 3-1. You can make Real Madrid redraft its whole team. They're still gonna win, apparently. But it looked like they were in trouble in the second match day. Atletico Madrid started the game well. It was a great watch, and Luis Diaz played in Julian Alvarez to give Atletico Madrid an early 1-0 lead. But before the half, the script would change completely. Leroy Sané, Jude Bellingham, Conor Gallagher. We'll take one of those, please. The player you probably didn't expect. Just a few minutes later, it was Leroy Sané at the back post to make it 2-1. And just a few minutes after that, this. Conor Gallagher again. Real Madrid always finds the gems. And despite the fact they only had 0.95 XG, Real Madrid wins 3-1. That's 6 points in the bag. And Atletico Madrid, the team featuring Griezmann as their number 1 overall pick, in trouble. The other match was once again a draw between Sevilla and Barcelona, setting up a very dramatic final day. Sevilla and Atletico Madrid on 1 point, Barcelona on 2 points, and the second spot fully up for grabs. Barcelona would go into the unconscious goal scorer Harry Kane. With a 1-0 lead, Dusan Vlahovic would go down with an injury. But despite losing their starting striker, Real Madrid would find a way. Casemiro, with like his 1 goal per season, scored an outrageous banger. But then it was Barcelona that got the set piece. And who better than James Ward-Prowse to play the ball short? The set piece play falls apart, and apparently James Ward-Prowse was a little upset by that because he just cleans out Leroy Sané and picks up a straight red card. Now it's Barcelona hanging on for dear life, hoping the other match ends in a draw, but the unlikeliest player on the field, Boubacar Kamara, scores a banger. Because Real Madrid is bangers only, and they're the only team coming out of the group stage with a full 9 points in 2 different comeback victories. They somehow still have the Real Madrid voodoo. With Barcelona losing, the other match was basically a win and you're in situation. And both teams would create a lot of chances. I mean, that XG amount for both these teams is serious. But the ratings for the attackers on Atletico Madrid were terrible. Griezmann let down the team that drafted him in the first round, and John McGinn couldn't fill in for Luis Diaz. Julian Alvarez couldn't either. Then they brought in Morata. He had a 6.2. Madison dropped an 8.3 in defeat. Don't even know what was going on there. But Sevilla's well-rounded 4-4-2 got the job done. That eliminated Harry Kane's Barcelona and Antoine Griezmann's Atletico Madrid, leaving us with a final 8. Manchester United against Juventus, Napoli against Manchester City, Dortmund against Sevilla, and Real Madrid, Bayern Munich. Each one of these rounds would be 2 legs. Team Juventus against Team Manchester United is Team Erling Haaland against Team Vinny Jr. Except it wasn't, because Vinicius was out hurt. Joel Linton had to start in his place. And it would be Charles de Ketelaere that scored a beautiful individual goal to put Juventus in front 1-0. In the second leg, Manchester United would show some life. They got Vinicius Jr. back and scored an early goal off a set piece to even the aggregate. But a few minutes later, Juventus would get a penalty. And the overall talent of this Juventus team, that had 2 of the best fullbacks in the world, and Erling Haaland up top, was enough. Team Manchester United could not ride Darwin Núñez to victory. The matchup between Napoli and Manchester City looked like it was going to be a Manchester City win. I mean, after all, Napoli had started this entire campaign with a pretty embarrassing-looking loss, right? I mean, this is the team that drafted Ansu Fati first. Surely they aren't going to show up and win the first leg 4-1. Oh, I leaked the ending. The sterling defense and cracked midfield fed into a dominant goal fest for Team Napoli, well, Team Ansu Fati. While Nico Williams and Paulo Dybala produced absolute disaster classes, and only Alexander Isak's second half goal to cut the lead to 2 was the shining light here. The second leg would see Napoli just pour it on even more. A goal from João Palhinha to make it 5-1. Manchester City and Manchester United getting found out. The Premier League clubs not too good at drafting their teams here, but it's the last 2 ties that would sit on a knife's edge. Borussia Dortmund against Sevilla. Dortmund, the team with that Thuram, Rashford, De Bruyne, Saka front 4. Well, they would score first, thanks to one of them, Rashford, finding a lovely ball to Javi Guerra, who was just waiting to tap it home. But Sevilla cooked up a response. Its excellent offensive creators found Dominic Calvert-Lewin, one of the pair of strikers up top with Lewandowski. The issue for Sevilla is the defense. The match ratings after the first leg were terrible, except for Geertruida. You were doing okay. The second leg is where things would really get tasty, and the key players, they would come up big. Sevilla would break the ice. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's aerial prowess shining through on a corner. This would tie up the tie at 1 goal apiece. But then it was Dortmund's turn. Marcus Rashford up to Thuram, who battles that ball into the back of the net. This puts Dortmund back ahead by a goal on aggregate. And now the hour is getting late for Sevilla. 73rd minute. Fede Valverde down the right wing, and it's Robert Lewandowski heading back to Granit Xhaka. But it would all come undone because of Sevilla's great weakness, its defense. Trying to pass it around the back, DeMarco misplayed a ball to Ter Stegen that Thuram, the first-round pick for Dortmund, pounces on. 2-2. Marcus Rashford would score a very late goal for Dortmund to seal it, knocking out Sevilla. No more Lewandowski, Dominic Calvert-Lewin front line. Dang it! That brings us to the final quarterfinal, the huge one between Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. 2 teams that won 5 of their 6 matches in the group stage. But in the first leg, it wasn't about Jamal Musiala, Bernardo Silva, or Christopher Nkunku for Bayern Munich, or Jude Bellingham, or Conor Gallagher, or Casemiro, or Leroy Sané for Real Madrid. It was once again about one of the stars of the tournament, Rafinha for Bayern Munich, whose ability to arrive late in the box was befuddling every defense and allowed Bayern to pick up a 1-0 win in the first leg. They were aided by the fact that Real Madrid didn't have a true striker to start in this game. Dusan Vlahovic was still injured, and they put the Frenchman Terrier up top just to see what would happen. Then they subbed in Nicholas Jackson, and that didn't really work either. But you've probably forgotten one important fact. Real Madrid is still Real Madrid. In the second leg, Dusan Vlahovic returns, and it inspires a complete reversal. Look at the match ratings from the front 5 here. Every single one of that front 5 produced some sort of goal involvement, either a goal goal or an assist as Real Madrid jumped out to a 3-0 lead early in the second half. A lead it would not relinquish. Bayern Munich, as amazing as they looked in this tournament behind that incredible 4-4-2, was no match for the Real Madrid voodoo. And with that, we bid adieu to what was a very fun and well-composed team. Goodbye, Bayern. Hello, Final Four teams. Dortmund against Juventus, Napoli against Real Madrid. The first legs of these two ties would leave it all to play for. The first leg in Dortmund against Juventus would be dominated by Borussia Dortmund, but they couldn't score a goal. Thuram and Rashford, the two biggest goal scorers for this team the entire tournament, drop a 6.3 and 6.4 respectively. De Bruyne, who's been quiet, was pulling the strings but couldn't open it up. The good news for Dortmund is their defense is also insane. And as a result, Gabby Martinelli, Erling Haaland, Domenico Berardi, they couldn't get free either for Juventus. It's a Herculean battle. But who would join them in the final? Napoli or Real Madrid? The team featuring Jude Bellingham, Dusan Vlahovic, Leroy Sané against the team that drafted freaking Ansu Fati in the first round and is somehow here in the semifinal because they drafted the rest of their team so well. Well, the first leg would not be short on drama. As we've seen so often in this tournament, set pieces set up Real Madrid for success as Michael Olise finishes off a well-moved play. But then, mama, it's that man again. Ansu Fati, pouncing on a horrific mistake to tie the game. I mean, I just don't know what Leroy Sané is doing there. And then Napoli does to Real Madrid what Real Madrid does to other teams. Palhinha scores an absolute scorcher that really asks some uncomfortable questions of Mamardashvili. But of course, Real Madrid pulls it back anyways with a crazy deflected goal that bounces right off Olise's face. For the second leg, Borussia Dortmund would up the ante when it came to their defense. They would move Manuel Akanji to defensive midfield and bring in Wesley Fofana as another one of their really talented defenders. And it would only take until the second minute for there to be a breakthrough. Kevin De Bruyne doing exactly what he always does, slipping a beautiful ball to Darmian, who finishes it off for Dortmund and breaks the massive rock ceiling on this tie. But Juventus surely has the quality to turn this around. I mean, Alphonso Davies at left back, Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back. They've got Berardi, Martinelli, and of course, the secret weapon, their first overall pick in the entire draft, Erling Haaland. But the only one of those guys to get a good rating was Alphonso Davies. Juventus would never find a goal, and Rashford would score a late exclamation point goal. Dortmund holds Juventus and Erling Haaland scoreless over both legs to carry this stacked Dortmund team all the way to the final. The team that had the last pick of the first round and subsequently the first pick of the second round was making it work. Which brings us potentially to the match of the tournament. Real Madrid-Napoli 2-2 on aggregate. Here we go. It's Real Madrid's move first, with Dusan Vlahovic ripping a ball by David De Gea with some beautiful build-up play. But then Alexis McAllister scores a worldie of a free kick. Lots of quality all over the field for both of these teams. And then, you won't believe it, but Ansu Fati pounces on another mistake, this time by Ruben Diaz, who beats him to the first ball, but doesn't take enough care with the touch to put Napoli in front for the second time in the tie. 2-1 in the match, 4-3 on aggregate. Then a ripped through ball finds Iago Aspas to make it 3-1 on the day and 5-3 on aggregate. But we're talking about Real Madrid here. So you know, this isn't over. In the 71st minute, Kieran Tierney, battling through an injury as he always is, finds a beautiful ball to Michael Olise. De Gea doesn't know he's there, and all of a sudden it's 3-2. And in the 85th minute, it's another back-breaking corner from Real Madrid. We go to penalties, where Iago Aspas, the excellent veteran leader, has his saved by Mamardashvili. And Napoli is never able to recover, losing the penalty shootout to Real Madrid, who is down 2 goals with less than 30 minutes to go. This Napoli team ended up being incredibly talented, incredibly dangerous. Rodri's out here dropping 7.8s. It doesn't matter. Real Madrid's gonna Real Madrid it up. And a team that picked Dusan Vlahovic in the opening round to be their center forward will be playing against Borussia Dortmund, the team that picked dead last. And so, we've reached the fantasy draft final. Borussia Dortmund against Real Madrid. These two lineups stacked with talent, pulling off victories all over the place, compiled masterfully by managers and general managers alike. In this final, it's only one leg. The first half was tense, and Dusan Vlahovic would go down with an injury, prompting Real Madrid to sub in none other than Nicholas Jackson for the draft Champions League final. And then it was time. Borussia Dortmund, Alex Moreno, Mason Mount with a beautiful first-time ball for Bukayo Saka, who shelfs it. 1-0 Dortmund, 33 minutes to go. But a corner. Conor Gallagher, and it gets through to Leroy Sané. Inexplicably, Marcus Thuram and Virgil van Dijk, two of the best aerial players in the tournament, completely air the ball. Leroy Sané equalizes, and that sends us on a journey that you will not believe. Because for the second straight penalty shootout, the opening taker against Mamardashvili gets saved. He's a born and ready Real Madrid keeper. But then the golden boy, Jude Bellingham, misses. Bukayo Saka restores order by scoring his penalty. Then Hoffman scores his. Then Kevin De Bruyne scores his. Then Terrier comes up and he scores. Then Gerard Moreno, goal. Then Casemiro, goal. Then Virgil van Dijk, goal. Leroy Sané has to score, and he does. Kulusevski, goal for Dortmund. Calabria has to score, and he does. Akanji scores. Ruben Diaz has to score, and he does. Matteo Guendouzi, not often used in this tournament, he scores. Then Pau Torres, has to, and he does. Malo Gusto scores. Kieran Tierney has to score, and he does. That's 8 straight players for both teams that have scored. Then there's Ruggieri, whose penalty is saved. Mamardashvili stays home. That brings up Boubacar Kamara, who has had a brilliant tournament and can now win it for Real Madrid. And here it is. Murray with the save. He stays home. It was hard and high right down the middle. One of the hardest pens to save, and Murray saves it. We are now headed to the goalkeepers, which means it is Murray's turn to take the penalty after making the save to keep Dortmund alive. And he hits the post. He hits the post. This brings up Real Madrid goalkeeper Georgi Mamardashvili, who once again has an opportunity to win the match for Real Madrid and the championship of the inaugural Draft Champions League. And he does. He goes right down the middle. Mamardashvili, unbelievably, wins it for a Real Madrid team that's drafted. They're drafted. Sure, they have a few of the same players like Bellingham's there. He dropped the 6.2 in the last match. Their starting striker and first-round pick got hurt multiple times. But Real Madrid is unkillable. And I think we've now proven it's hard-coded into Football Manager at this point. Really, my biggest takeaway is that Real Madrid can play Nicholas Jackson for like 90 minutes and win the Draft Champions League final anyways. If you want us to do more of these videos, please do subscribe. They take a ton of work to put together, so I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to watch more crazy Football Manager stuff, we made a World Cup, except every team in the World Cup is just 11 of the same player. All different positions, even a couple of goalkeepers all over the field. So that's right there. Enjoy it, and I'll see you guys on stream. Bye.